Today on Owl Have You Know.
That's what I just really encourage people to do is, like I said, find one person in your community or talk to an organization. Is there somebody in Africa or some other place that you could help? And I would, even suggest that, really sew into somebody and just see what happens. Trust in people and try to, build them up as a mentor.
Welcome in. I am here with Scott Noel. My name is David Druglever, Rice MBA class of 2012, and Scott Noel is class of 2004. A little ahead of me on that one. Beat me to the punch, Scott. So,
Yeah.
Scott, welcome in.
Yeah. Thanks for talking to me, David. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. And Scott, I'll sling out the quick intros here for folks tuning in. Not only are you class of 2004, but you're also the director of tech enterprise solutions at One Acre Fund. And I'm sure we'll get into that. It's a very interesting space. And also want to say I'm in Dallas, Texas, and you're in Nairobi, Kenya. Is that correct?
Yep. So about 8 hours time difference, I guess. And so it's, yeah, other end of the world right now for me.
Well, Scott, I did my LinkedIn stalking on you, and your background, the big chunks I'm seeing here. We are simpatico in the sense of a tech background and MBA, of course. You've gone into IT consulting and program management, and now are leading IT for One Acre Fund. But in your own words, can you give us the Harbor Cruise version of how you got here? Your backgrounds, maybe even where you grew up, and how you ended up in Nairobi, Kenya.
Yeah, so I've lived in Texas all my life. I'm from kind of rural Texas Panhandle, and I went to Rice, did my undergraduate there. So I was the youngest person going into my MBA class. I was one of those people who came in with no work experience. Basically, I had, kind of been doing internships in the tech space, but came in directly just right out of my undergraduate at Rice into the Rice MBA program. I did my master's degree in electrical engineering at the same time. So while my other classmates were, doing the MBA program, I was running across campus, taking engineering classes and basically doing both programs at the same time that I had to complete the MBA. And so that was kind of my tech focus. So to get into the tech industry, and I did the entrepreneurship part of everything. And I wanted to kind of just see how I could use tech to make money essentially. And as you mentioned, I got into project management and program management and started leading a lot of really large projects for places like NASA, U.S. Treasury Department, basically these large, logistical projects. It was really good work. By the time I was 30, I was pretty well set. Had a pretty good life in the U.S. And as things often happen, your life is not really the way you would expect it to be. Uh, and I'll kind of get into the story of how I transitioned into Africa. So my wife was teaching linguistics at the University of Texas at Arlington. And she met a lady from Sudan she was working with. She was studying the language of Darfur, Sudan as her master's degree. And she came home one day and said that she had given $100 to the Sudanese refugee to help her because she was having some hard times. And I got pretty angry about that because I had knew nothing about Africa. I was in Mr. MBA, and I decided to go confront this lady because I thought it was like one of these Nigerian email scams or something like that. I knew nothing. I was, like I said, rural West Texas. And when I met this lady, I went over to her house to find out, thinking she was basically taking our money. She opened her door, gave me a big hug, welcomed me in, had made a big feast for us. And she said, in my culture, you've helped me out. And now I'm here to repay this back to you because of the situation I've been in through this war in Darfur, Sudan. And it just really surprised me. I didn't know what to think. And as we went into this lady's house, we saw Sudanese TV. I don't know where she got Sudanese TV from, but we saw these atrocities happening in Sudan. And, it just really kind of really surprised me. And I wanted to learn more about that thing I didn't know about and refugees coming into the U.S. So long story short, I started teaching robotics training to a lot of the refugee kids that were in this community. And we would take these kids with basically no money. We would take them up against the top private, Dallas high schools at the time. And these kids, working on no budget could beat some of these Dallas big private high schools. And as I talked to the kids, they talked about their education and wanting to learn more. So I really wanted to see how I could help out, with these kids from the situation they came from, but I didn't know where to start. And I was searching on the internet one day and I popped across this news article that said that the head of the United Nations said that northern Uganda was the worst humanitarian crisis in the world today. While I was enjoying, partios at the MBA school in northern Uganda, there were, about 60,000 child soldiers that were taken. And if they spoke up against the army, they had their lips padlocked shut. They had their, ears chopped off if they were listening to what the rebels would say, et cetera, et cetera. And it said nobody was doing anything about this situation. So I told my wife, I said, hey, we're going to get on a plane and go check this situation out for ourselves. We knew nobody. We knew nothing. We just went up there to go check it out. And what we saw when we got on the ground was worse than I had expected. Like I said, people with, had, padlock marks through their mouth where their lips had been padlocked shut and limbs cut off and, bombs, mines everywhere. And the war had ended. It was safe at that time. I don't want to make it sound like I was going into a war zone, but the situation of recovery was very bad. And we found a group of people and decided to create a school for a community of 200 children that we saw where their school had been destroyed because of this war and they were just returning home. And so that got very successful. And as that started to grow, we realized we had to be here full time. Basically, people would say that I was the last person they would expect to be coming out here to Africa. But what I saw firsthand and the situations I saw, I would say like, if my friends at business school knew this situation, they would do something about it. Nobody would sit back and let these type of things happen because we know a lot of strong people through business school and, our network. So I started going out to my network, I started raising money for these causes and, trying to get help. And eventually that led me to live out here full time in Nairobi, Kenya, which is kind of like the headquarters of where you can do a lot of humanitarian work here in East Africa. And I had the opportunity to come on with One Acre Fund, which is a fast growing company. It's only been started about 15 years ago. And we now serve over 1 million farmers. It's grown to that rate of the farmers that we serve in that short period of time. And we now have 8,000 employees. And so with my job, I get to lead a lot of the tech initiatives that we're doing. And I can talk about that a little bit more as we go through this process.
On the humanitarian side, it's really interesting to hear how you had been introduced to what was going on in Sudan and Uganda. And I think about this a lot. I read a good bit about morality and ethic and frameworks and how we should go about thinking about donating to other causes, particularly if it's far away from us or people that we don't understand, unless you're, as you're saying, boots on ground. So, very broadly speaking, how would you recommend for folks to get versed in how they can help and to better educate themselves on what's going on, out in places like Sudan, Uganda, and Kenya. Just short of actually flying there like you and your wife did, what other kind of ways can folks get, either get educated or get involved that would be most impactful?
Well, I would say that it's critical to actually talk to, people like myself or other leaders of organizations who do have boots on the ground to really understand the situation because I think a lot of people are well-meaning and they want to do the right thing and without really having that context, it's really hard to understand what people are going through. So, for instance, at One Acre Fund, we work with farmers. And so a lot of times when I talk to people, particularly from Texas, where I'm from, rural Texas, they say, oh, maybe we'll send over a John Deere tractor. And that's what people need. They need a tractor to do better farming. Well, a tractor in, rural Uganda, let's say, there's not going to be parts to repair it. If it breaks down, nobody can do anything with it. The farmer's land size is really not big enough to justify that type of machinery, et cetera, et cetera. And so by talking to somebody though that works on the ground, we can help guide the conversation about what is really needed. And it's not that people don't need stuff, but we can direct like the best way to do that. And a lot of the supplies are already here in East Africa. I think that there's an opinion that East Africa just doesn't have any supplies and, we need to send everything from the US, but that's really not the case. We do have access to a lot of materials here or can source them here locally for much cheaper than sending them from the US.
Yeah, it makes me think of there was a study, and I'll have to find a way to reference it better here. But everyone has seen the commercial with the starving child in Africa, and hey, can you just send $5 a month, and this will save that person's life? And what the study found was that if someone was willing to give, say, $5 a month for then the study then went into say, well, okay, we have they're identical, a twin sister or brother who's also in the same situation. Would you also give, to that? And it turns out it's not linear. So if it's $5 and you go to 10 identical people, doesn't go to 50, people's willingness to give goes down per capita, as the depth of the problem goes up. And so that's why I ask it that way, just because I think we can all relate to a singular person's either suffering or need for help, but we have trouble trying to get engaged when it's at a much larger scale. So you talk about 1 million farmers. I think for a lot of people, it's hard to get their head wrapped around how do I help, that many people, with just all the way from here in the US, for example. So the psychology of it is what I was trying to get after there. And so I don't know if you kind of run into that, or if those conversations transpire in your
Yeah,
orbit.
yeah, yeah, sure. I mean, there's two ways of looking at it. So at our organization, when we're working with a million farmers, we do have to look at the impact basis and really measure how much impact we're having on each farmer. And every decision we do, when you're in MBA school, you talk about return on investment, and you're looking at every decision you make on what's the return on investment. You always have to be making profit. And for a nonprofit organization, because we're not taking that profit back, what we look at is what we call social return on investment. And so, that might be, for instance, we're giving a family a solar light, but a child can then study during the nighttime hours and get a better education. So we have to really look at that social return on investment, but everything is impact and return on investment. Now that's from an organization at our scale that's trying to reach a million farmers. You have to look at that impact. What I say for the average person that wants to get involved in like the nonprofit is to think of the saying that you should do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. So when I go out to one of these huge slums here in Nairobi, we have slums of a million people, and you look at it and you just say, "There's no way I could ever put a dent in this or help in the situation." And this doesn't just mean like going to Africa. This could also be in your local community, etc. I think people can make a lot of difference just by focusing on one person. Find one person, whether it's a refugee, whether it's a homeless person, whether it's somebody with a drug problem, etc., and really sow into that person's life and make an impact on that one person. And that's how you kind of can start on this journey, because if everybody were to help one other person and help them in a deep way, not just $100 or whatever, but really help that person out, I think that's where you can see a lot of social impact. So yeah, that's two paths of looking at it, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that's a super skillful way of saying that. Thanks for diving into that, pretty loaded question. So and topic. Yeah, social return on investment. I want to put an exclamation point on that. That's such a fantastic lens to see things through. So kind of back to your role and what you're focused on. As you mentioned offline, when you think about helping a million farmers plus, you're not necessarily thinking about the tech that powers all of that. As an IT and enterprise technology leader, can you help us understand the intersection of helping actually, if we maybe we could even back up even before that, just the overall charter of 1 Acre Fund and what does success look like for the organization?
Yeah, sure. So what One Acre Fund does is we supply fertilizer and seeds to smallhold farmers on credit. So it's a mixture of logistics and distribution and microfinance. And the reason we do this is that, agriculture was basically fixed during the last century, during the 1900s. In the US, we figured out what is needed to make crops grow well. You just need fertilizer, you need improved seed, and proper planting techniques. And this stuff is really basic. And so people would say, well, why isn't Africa doing this? Well, a rural farmer in Rwanda, deep in the heart of Africa, doesn't have easy access to that fertilizer. And if they can't run down to the local shop and get it because it has to be imported, it's maybe made in another country, and to get that to them is very difficult. And on top of that, when they go to the shop and they can find it, they can't afford it. And so the goal is that we want to be able to provide that to them on credit and have them repay it because they have the money, they can resell the crops and repay the loan. And it's not a handout in that way because we're then giving it to them on credit. At the same time, that gets the fertilizer to them, gets the improved seed, and we also provide training. And so that allows them to really multiply their harvest. And in Africa, it's enough to be kind of the breadbasket of the whole area. And we can help families get through what we call the hunger season, because most of these families are just growing food to support their families, to have food to get through the season. And we're getting to them to the point where they'll have food left over, and then they can resell that and start making income for themselves as well.
The multiplying the harvest is really interesting, and certainly that helps farmers in Kenya. Is the scope beyond Kenya? You mentioned other struggling countries like Sudan and Uganda, or is it focused only on Kenya?
The countries that One Acre Fund works in are Kenya, Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, Zambia, Ethiopia, Malawi. We're in Nigeria now as well. So it's a lot of the East African countries. And those countries, are typically countries where the income levels are quite low. They're kind of far behind a lot of the indexes. And so that's where our particular focus is right now. And we particularly focus on the areas where they have a large potential for agricultural impact. And when you look at some of those areas, they're quite small geographical areas, but they have a huge potential for agriculture. And they're just underutilized right now because maybe the farming techniques are more traditional and not, improved farming techniques. Um, and so, yeah, that's where we fit in. And so, uh, through working with a million farmers, you can imagine the impact that has when you look at the entire East Africa.
Yeah, MBAs like to sling around, KPIs and pull out their spreadsheets and put, fill out the graphs and what have you. So the key performance indicators is what I'm thinking of. So when you or the board or the leadership team is looking at the agricultural impact, are there certain KPIs or metrics that are being followed to measure how the organization or to you're saying the social return on investment?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I mean, it comes down to what impact are we having on that farmer, and that for agricultural inputs that could be measured in terms of their harvest. So we measure that against a control group, for instance. So one farmer is not using our product, and his neighbor is using our product, and what is the increase that he's able to sell the harvest for once the season's over. So that would be an impact of how much money he's getting over his neighbor. The other kind of impact metrics is we sell a lot of solar lights and cook stoves, and so we look at impact of like reduced kerosene usage, and that's a big environmental impact. We also sell a lot of trees, and so with all the climate change and everything like that, we're trying to make a big impact by providing trees to farmers, which also helps with the environment. And we have ways of measuring impact with that side as well.
How much do you personally interact with the farmers, sort of the boots on ground of the folks that you're helping?
In my role currently, on a day-to-day basis, I'm not out in the field as much as I would like to be. Through my time in East Africa, I have spent a lot of time in the field, though, and our organization itself has a very heavy field focus. We have a very small U.S. office, for instance. So when somebody comes to work for us, we typically have them going directly into a field location where we have to understand our farmers. A lot of user-centered design where we don't want to be building tools that aren't relevant to the culture of our farmers. So although for my role, it definitely for more the tech side. I'm not out in the field day to day. We're kind of more in front of the computer, but you know we do have to spend some time in the field quite a bit and understand the context.
So as a tech leader, so going back to the question I was attempting to tee up probably prematurely, but we can come back to that is when you think about helping farmers and distribution of fertilizers and seeds and trees, et cetera, how does technology play into this? I mean, clearly there's, some tracking efforts here and what have you, but I think it goes deeper because you mentioned logistics and distribution and all that is, I'm sure, not done manually, or at least I'd not like to think it's not done with a abacus or something like that.
Yeah,
So
exactly. I think that's what's surprising to people is how much technology is actually involved. So if you think about it, we get these farming inputs to within 2 kilometers of where the farmer lives, and we have to do things like one, how are we going to collect orders, from all those rural remote farmers? Uh, so our ordering systems. How do we collect payments from those farmers? How do we get updates to them to know? when we'll be in their area, how do we collect our impact, how are we measuring, what they're harvesting. There's like that aspect of it, and a lot of that is really grown a lot over the last few years due to digital technology. A lot can be done through basic feature phones, or smartphone penetration is becoming more in these countries. So that's SMS, USSD, WhatsApp for business. A lot of people now are using WhatsApp, and we can communicate with farmers through WhatsApp. Um, and so managing that, taking all that data and ingesting it, or what our customers ordered, what their repayments are, how we're collecting the money from them. Then going on to the side of doing all the financial management that goes along with that. On top of that, we then have to, once the farmers ordered something, we have to get all those inputs to them. So there's all the logistics, warehousing, trucking, logistics, input distribution to farmers. You know, it's a pretty huge logistical problem when you start scaling to that size of 8,000 employees and a million farmers. There's a ton of things that have to happen and all be in sync to operate at that scale. And so, across multiple country contexts, multiple exchange rates, multiple government regulations, it's a real technical challenge, I would say, to make that happen, and to do it efficiently. We're not losing money terribly on every deal.
So how many support calls are you getting in the middle of the night these days?
Well, I think the thing is, I mean, most of our stuff happens during the day. Luckily, it's very different when I, maybe worked at NASA or something where they had shifts working at night. So luckily, we don't get as many support calls during the middle of the night. But a lot of stuff goes down. Obviously, when you're working in areas that have bad internet connectivity, it's kind of amazing. I can do this podcast here from Nairobi. Have a sort of decent connection. But when you go out to rural Rwanda, your internet access isn't going to be great, and we have to build technologies that will work in those environments.
Yeah, we're also simpatico in that way. We both worked at NASA. I'll have to chat with you offline on
Yep.
that one. Yeah.
Yep.
So, so in terms of you have this large organization, 1 Acre Fund, and the word competition is coming up in my mind, but it's of course being a nonprofit, it's sort of a strange word to use. But what sort of competition or organizations might be impinging on the efforts of what you're trying to do? Are there any interests out there of people, organizations, or government that run counter to what 1 Acre Fund is trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that does happen some. The way we try to treat it as a nonprofit organization is slightly different than a for-profit organization. Obviously, we do have people that are trying to do similar things to what we're trying to do, to maybe take the market share of our customers. And I think the way we kind of view it is, as long as the farmer's getting impact, if another organization can come around and do it more efficiently than we can, or have a better product. It's not like we're in deep throat competition, with them, and like a for-profit company would have to be. So we do a lot of sharing and collaboration with other organizations, and we try to form partnerships. That's one of the big things I try to do is particularly in the tech spaces, work with other organizations in the nonprofit space to help form those partnerships, so that we can kind of focus on what we're doing, and not have as much competition. Just like, for instance, if we're going to be sending 100 million text messages in a year, if I can get together with another nonprofit organization that's also going to send 100 million text messages, and we can find 30 other organizations in that situation, we can go to the telecom companies and negotiate, let's say a 1 cent rate discount. Well, on 100 million messages, that's a huge discount for our organization. So we form a lot of collaborative partnerships with other organizations and try to get the cost down of what we're doing. So that's a large part of what I try to do. But yeah, we obviously do have competitors in the space, and we do have to kind of watch the landscape as well.
Maybe 2 or 3 sort of final topics, here. We've covered a lot of grounds, and just, I mean, Scott, you just have an incredible energy, and you have a giving heart. You've done a lot of work, I think personally and in business, with people that need help, and would you like to share perhaps a highlight reel moment inside of this work that you're doing, or maybe, your proudest accomplishment in your professional career?
What I would say I've proudest of, or some of the individual success stories of what I've seen from individuals who've come out through pretty terrible situations. Um, I for a while here in Kenya, uh, I used to run an orphanage, several orphanages actually, and you have kids who come from very bad backgrounds that a lot of people would have given up on, and basically, when those kids come out of the program, uh, you know, it's hard for them to go into society based on their background, and we've helped a couple of those kids go into business. Even just small business. There's this old proverb that says, if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for the day, but if you teach a man to fish, he'll fish for a lifetime. But then also sometimes you just have to buy the fishing pole for the man. And that's what most people kind of miss out on is that they kind of say, well, just train somebody how to start a business and they'll go do it. But if you're an orphan or somebody who just you know doesn't have the resources, they can't do anything. But if you will then take that person and help them out a little bit, maybe it's just like a little loan that you can give somebody, um, you know, then they can really thrive. And so I've seen some really great scenarios of kids that we've been able to help them out a little bit just to get started, in their life and to watch them grow out to be responsible adults, be contributors to their society. Um, that's what I just really encourage people to do is, like I said, find one person in your community, or talk to an organization. Is there somebody in Africa or some other place that you could help through a micro loan? I know our MBA classmates probably have a little bit of money laying around and I would, even suggest that, really sew into somebody and try to just see what happens, really trust in people and try to, build them up as a mentor. Help them out even more than just training, but really help them get to that next point in life. And I think amazing things can happen.
Awesome. Very cogent, punchy answer. Thank you for that. And so, to circle it back to your business school experience, and are there any skills that you picked up and have used that you can put your finger on, or perhaps wish you had focused on more when you were in the program that you could use today, or wish you could be using today?
I mean, I think the networking side is really important. Being able to use that business school network. When uh, I basically decided, hey, I want to go, build a school in rural northern Uganda. Coming to people and just saying, hey, I need some money to do this. I don't have the money to do this. I need to raise money. I need to raise it quickly, and being able to have that network who can step in and support and find the contacts to do that. I think that's an important part of it. But in every day, I consistently use the skills from business school, whether it's negotiation, understanding how to work in an international context. But even in the tech space, I mean, the skills of finance, strategy, the complete business school education has made me be able to come into these contexts, and really thrive. I think that's one of the reasons why, One Acre Fund has been so successful, because we have a lot of strong leaders who can look at it, even though it's a nonprofit, to be able to run the organization like a professional business, and take all those lessons learned. And when we're looking at supply chain optimization, we're able to optimize our supply chain so it doesn't make us go broke on the donations that we do have. Things like that. So that's I think the Rice Business School education is a very strong one, and I think it's something that's really helped me to have a really well-rounded picture. Even though I'm working more on the tech side, I think it's been super important.
Awesome. And last two, I think, short fire off questions. I'm dying to know. You've been there for, I think, many years. So, how's your Swahili?
It's not so good. At some point, I might try to become a citizen here, and I'll have to pass the test. So I'm pretty nervous about that. But yeah, so foreign languages was, as a tech guy, foreign languages was not my expertise. So I know enough to get by barely.
Well, it's still laudable and commendable. So, okay, perfect. Well, the last one I'll throw at you, Scott, is, and you've alluded to it, but I'll ask more directly, is for folks that are interested in either connecting with you to maybe go a little deeper or ask more specifics, or otherwise connect with One Acre Fund to get involved. What are some of the recommended pathways to reach out, learn more, and have more conversation?
Yeah, I think the easiest way probably would to be to contact me directly, I'm always happy to talk to anybody associated with business school or in the community that's interested. My profile's on LinkedIn. We might be able to provide an email contact for me through this, and that would be about the starting point. And then, if it's something that I can't particularly help with, I can definitely direct people who want to get involved more in the right direction.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Well, Scott, it's been an absolute pleasure. And in the spirit of I'll have you know, are there any pearls of wisdom or passion projects around the corner or otherwise little known factoids about you that you'd like to share before we adjourn here?
Yeah, I don't think there's any low known factoids, but what I would just say to people is just to remember that reach for your dreams and try to do the most challenging thing you can. I mean, for me, it's not been easy to move to East Africa for sure and leave my U.S. life behind. And whatever stage you're at, kind of in your career, I think there's always more, and getting that momentum and the passion behind whatever it is you decide to do, whether it's jumping into a new business or starting a new business or making a career change, etc. I think for me, it's been a testament that you can kind of do whatever you want to do, even if you never thought you'd be doing it. That just grab that momentum and just do, take on that project or start the business, do whatever you want to do, and don't be afraid to do it because it'll end up working out okay.
Well, I can definitely feel the momentum and passion in your voice, and it's quite palpable. So, living what you preach, love it. Scott, thank you so much. I've enjoyed this, and I hope that's been mutual. And folks tuning in, thank you for tuning in to I'll Have You Know, and take care, everyone, and goodbye.
Yeah, thank you.
This has been I'll Have You Know. Thanks for listening. You can find links and more information about our guests, hosts, and announcements on our website, business.rice.edu. Please subscribe to this podcast wherever you find your favorite podcasts and leave us a comment while you're at it and let us know what you think. I'll Have You Know is a production of Rice Business and is sponsored by the Rice Business Alumni Board. The hosts of I'll Have You Know are myself, Christine Dobbin, and David Drew Gleaver.